Good morning, everyone. Today is Thursday, May 20th already, and I will go ahead and call the Concord Middle School Building Committee meeting to order. It's approximately 7:30 a.m. Let's call roll. Stephen Crane. Not here yet. Does anyone see Stephen? I have it.
No, not yet.
Okay, Jared Stanton.
Present.
Hi, Jared. Matt Johnson.
Present.
Good morning, Matt. Lori Hunter.
Here.
Justin Cameron.
Good morning.
Good morning, John Harris.
Here.
Good morning, Russ Hughes.
Good morning.
Good morning, Kate Hanley.
Good morning here.
Good morning, Peter Fashalis with the
Present.
lovely backyard. Great, thanks, Peter. Court Booth.
Here.
Hi, Court. Heather
morning.
Bout.
Here, good morning.
Good morning, Frank Cannon.
Yes, I'm here.
Good morning, Chris Popoff.
Here.
Charlie Parker.
Here.
Hey, Charlie. Matt Root.
Present. Good morning, everyone.
Matt. Pat Nelson.
Present.
And I am here, Don Goriello. So good morning, everyone. First item of business is the approval of minutes. Sorry to have sent some out sort of later in the evening last night. I don't know if folks have had a chance to look at them. We're looking at needing to approve April 15, April 27, and May 6th, which was our most recent meeting a couple weeks ago. How do folks feel about having reviewed them? Any edits? Does anyone? I guess I'm kind of taking a pulse of the group. If folks have had a chance, at least the older ones, to review them, if we're comfortable, at least for the April 15th. Looking at that, I think that had some edits, if my memory serves. I don't know. Does anyone?
Yeah,
wanna
that's right.
speak up?
It was an edited version,
Yep.
just to beef up the and correct the language surrounding the motions.
Hi, Ian / Debbie. I assume wife, child, someone. It just
Yeah.
That's all right. I recognize your voice. Good morning. Okay, so thank you for that. So
I have a couple comments on the April 29th minutes, but the others are okay from my perspective.
okay, the
I
April.
don't know if I qualify as one of the older members, but
Okay, do you want to go ahead and give us your edits?
yeah, the comments are both with regards to comments made by finance committee members who probably can't speak on behalf of this. So one was just at the very outset regarding Dean Banfield's presentation, and then Kristen Olson's comment that follows. And I think what it tends to, the way that it's written, where he's quoting 694 square feet, and then she notes that 559 a square foot number, it makes it appear as if she's correcting, like that he's inflating the amount of square feet, but it's really the difference between, you know, a gross square foot and net square foot cost. And so the impression left by the minutes is that he made an error or she made an error, but you know, that's not really the case. So I don't know how to fix that, but I think that needs to be adjusted.
Okay, sounds like a clarification on
Yeah.
what each
I mean, it may be
number
that
is
this
implying.
particular set of minutes, you know, we could take it back and take a look at that.
Okay.
And then the same thing on Mary Hartman's comment under public comments near the end. It's just a mistake. I think it says, you know, noted at town meeting, the 108 million was presented. And she
Oh.
clearly did not say that.
Correct. Okay, thank you for that, Matt. And those are both from the April 20th.
April 29th. I looked through the May 6th. They seem fine.
Okay. Does anyone else have any edits, comments, corrections?
Just a comment generally, I hope we could
Sure.
strive to get these materials to the committee at least 24 hours in advance in the future.
Agreed, Court. And that's why when I saw it come in my inbox last night, I went ahead and forwarded it. Typically, it would go through Aaron. and I'm always appreciative that she does it, but I knew that ahead of today. And if folks aren't comfortable voting on it, we can certainly defer, but if anyone's, had the opportunity, sounds like Matt was able to review them.
I have to confess that I may have looked at them, but I had not recently and not the most recent. And there were a lot of really important discussions and decisions made. So I guess I would suggest, unless I see a bunch of hands up from people saying, I feel really confident about these minutes, I would defer them to the next meeting.
Okay.
What about at least the oldest ones? I feel like we're a little behind on having minutes
April
of the paper on the
15th.
site.
And
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to second Pat's comment. I think we should defer on the ones that came last night. We can collect comments today, but I think we should defer on any voting, and we should allow comments at the next meeting on the two that were shipped last night.
Okay, so if I'm hearing the pulse of the room, let's look to approve the April 15, because I think the language was corrected and we've seen that correction. And then the later April meeting and then the last meeting will defer until next time so that folks have ample time to review those. And I will ask that Ian and his team at Hill make the changes Matt suggested today and resend those in short order to us so that we have, the time between basically today or early tomorrow as far as how quickly you can get them to us between then and our next meeting to review them. Everyone has ample time. So with that, I'd look for a motion to approve the April 15.
So moved.
Thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second,
Thank you, Heather. So we have a motion and a second to approve the April 15th meeting minutes as edited in the latest round that we've seen. Stephen
Just
Crane.
Quick discussion.
Sorry, Court.
on-
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I should call
Just-
for discussion.
No, forgive me,
Great,
quick
thank you.
discussion, just because we saw multiple versions, could somebody remind us when the most recent corrected one was sent out and by whom? Some of us have multiple versions of these kicking around.
Yep.
Just as a
Ian,
matter of housekeeping.
I'm gonna look at you, Ian, as I dig through my emails.
Thank you.
I actually think we saw it before the last meeting.
Yeah, I think so, but I just want to make
Yeah.
sure we all have captured what we're talking about as we vote on it.
I think the last one I saw was from, I'm not sure if it's the last one, sorry. I have one from Erin Higgins on April 28th that are the 4:15 minutes. Is that the most recent one?
I have that one as well, attached to the 4:15.
Although I'm not sure if that's the revised one.
It says final.
Dawn, do you want us to work with Hill and get clarity
Yeah,
and then
let's
we'll
do it that way. Let's make
postpone.
sure.
Yeah.
Hill,
Yeah.
I'm gonna make a request that when you edit it, please put an edit date on it so that a revision, say revision 1, or the one I have says final, and I just want to be sure. So Ian, can you please work with your team to get the latest, send all 3 together. Let's table the vote if that's okay. And let's send the latest and greatest because that was a really important meeting and we want to make sure we got it right. And I feel like I saw the corrected one. I just want to make sure everyone's comfortable
I was
with
going
it.
to say the latest that I've seen was from April 28th. I don't know that there really is confusion on this. I think that it almost has to be it.
Okay, all right. I'm
Can we
confident.
say the minutes as distributed on April 28th? At least we can get the April 15th done.
Yeah. How do folks feel? Let's take a vote. All right, we have a motion and we have a second, and let's amend, who made the motion? Frank, would you amend it to say as distributed on April 28th?
Yes.
Thank you. Heather, you still,
Second,
Seconded
amendment.
as distributed on April 28th.
okay,
All right.
great. Stephen Crane.
Yes.
Hi, Stephen. Good morning. Jared Stanton,
Yes.
Matt Johnson,
Yes.
Lori Hunter,
Yes.
Justin Cameron,
Yes.
John Harris,
Yes.
Russ Hughes,
Yes.
Kate Hanley,
Yes.
Peter Fashalis,
Yes.
Court Booth,
Yes.
Heather Bout,
Yes.
Frank Cannon,
Yes.
Chris Popoff,
Yes.
Charlie Parker,
Yes.
Matt Root,
Yes.
Pat Nelson.
Yes.
Thanks, Pat. And Dawn, I'm a yes. Okay, great. So we got the 15th out of the way. We'll table the 27th and 6th till the next meeting. That took way longer than it should have, but thank you for your patience. Okay, moving on to correspondence. I just want to, before I turn it over to Heather, let everyone know that right after our May 6th meeting, Pat Nelson and I both received emails of, emails of support from both Mary Hartman, the chair of the Concord Finance Committee, as well as Linda Esposito.
Escobedo.
I feel like I always say her name wrong. I'm sorry. Linda.
Escobedo.
Yes, Esposito. Letters of support thanking us and our committee and for being responsive and for all the hard work that we're doing. So I just wanted to share that. It was to Pat and myself specifically, but I just wanted to let everyone know that they were gracious enough to stick it out through our 3-hour+ meeting and to email and let us know that they're thankful that for all the hard work that our committee is doing. So I just wanted to share that with everyone. It's not technically correspondence, but thought everyone should know that they are absolutely engaged and are thankful for the work our committee is doing and supportive of our process. So thank you to those ladies for reaching out right after the meeting and thanking us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heather.
And this is a quick and easy one. We've only gotten 2 emails. One of them was asking us to consider hardwiring the building so that it's not all just wireless. And the other one had some suggestions on the space plan. So that's pretty quick. I will also just note really quickly, we have not 100% finalized or actually started to announce yet, but we have put a date on the calendar for our next public forum, which will be June 7th. It's a Monday evening at 7 p.m. I have that right, the 7th, that's great, yes. June 7th at 7 p.m. And that will be kind of our kickoff to schematic design for the public. It's our next public forum. So I just want to let everybody know so you can put it on your calendar.
Thank you, Heather. I think we should also let everyone know, because I think it happened right after our last meeting. We have an updated website that I think you sent a
Yes, I
link
did
around.
send that.
Do you-
That's true. That was right after our meeting.
I think it was
So-
right after. You want to talk
Yeah.
about that briefly? Because it's
Yeah.
great.
Oh, sure. And I have to start and end with huge kudos to Erin Higgins, who really did so much work on this and helped figure out building a website in Google Sites. We had debated this this whole website concept for a long time because the school site that we were on is just limited in terms of the formatting that we can use. So we've transferred over. It is a Google Sites site, and it now really looks like a building project site, and she did a fabulous job with it on it. All of the information that we had up on the last one is there and more, and it's more organized, I think more user-friendly. So the URL is even more user-friendly now. It's now cmsbuildingproject.org. So I did send it out to everybody. For some reason you haven't checked it out, please do. And everything, all of our presentations and meetings and agendas and minutes and all of that are on there, as well as building committee reports and updates of our forums and meeting videos and all of that. I think everything's a lot easier to find. So again, I started and ended with it, but huge kudos to Erin, as well as to the IT group who got it going on the back end. So thanks to everyone who worked on it. Oh, and the last piece of it is that we do have FAQs that are almost done and should be launched on there soon. And that has been a lot of work on behalf of Kristen and other SMMA folks and Hill and Stephen and Lori and Jerry and a lot of other people. So it's a lot of work going into those. So thank you to everybody for all that's going into it.
Thank you, Heather.
Sure.
Yeah, and thank you to the communications for yourself and Kate, formerly Pat, for being so transparent and open and willing to share. So all of that is excellent. So I thought it was worth bringing up for the
Great, thank
greater
you.
community
That's the
who's
goal.
following. Yeah, we all got the email internally, but for anyone who's following along, they may want to
Yes.
know about our new website.
Definitely.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. So moving on, we are to the schematic design overview. So Kristen, I am going to turn the meeting over to you. Just so everyone knows, we're kind of at a great milestone where we're at the end of feasibility. That page is behind us, that chapter, and we're moving forward into schematic design, which is really a fun and intense part of the design process. So a lot of decisions will be made in this process. So there's a lot of work to do. So Kristen's going to give us an overview and sort of lay out the parameters of what they'll need from our committee as far as decision making and process to get us to the end of schematic design.
Hey, Dawn, on that topic,
It's not-
when I went to the middle school building committee website, I thought, revised space summary adopted. It showed a picture of a spreadsheet. I clicked on the icon and there was an announcement instead. And I have to admit, I haven't yet seen a revised space summary. I don't know what our revised space summary is. I don't think that we have actually finished the prior milestone until we have a revised space summary. What we had it as a motion last time was more of a recipe. It said the number of seats in an auditorium. It said the width that could be accommodated by the length of 2 74-foot basketball courts. We don't have the deliverables from the prior phase of this project. We don't have a picture that we can show the public in June of the conceptual design that reflects those spaces. I don't know. I mean, were we intending to do that as part of the schematic design? But it just doesn't seem like we got very close to the finish line, and we then, jumped over the finish line and started the next race. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. 1 second, Kristen. That's a good point, Matt. And I think that's part of what I meant to lead into this section with, which was kind of a summary of the left to study in schematic design items, because there are a few that need to get studied immediately. Like in the next week or two, we need to have clarity on that as far as the gym, the actual square footage of the gymnasium. We have the parameters of the MIA main court and the 2 full-size cross courts that will fall within the width that's available based on that MIAA, and what that equates to from a square footage standpoint. I'm going to look to Kristen to.
Yeah, that's what I thought was going to happen in the last couple of weeks. Yep. I don't know.
Yeah, so Kristen, I'm going to ask that you speak to that as well as the auditorium. The other the other item I'm aware of is sort of simplification of the design that was brought up and I think that'll be an evolution in schematic design. That's very much where that process plays out, as far as, the design making its way to something that's more defined and concrete versus something that's sort of loose and amassing, right? But the items related to space have to do with the gymnasium, the exact square footage, and then the auditorium exact square footage based on the number of seats and what will fit. And I'll turn to Kristen as to where we are with that, and at what time do we expect to see those layouts and that square footage, so that we can then close out the space template based on the motion, as Matt mentioned. And then I guess I would ask if there are other issues that anyone's aware of that needs to be, studied immediately in schematic design as far as spaces go. I think we are in a pretty good place as far as the spaces supporting the educational plan. So really at the end, it was a matter of the gymnasium and auditorium, which we just need to have definitive numbers for.
Right, and recognizing that it's just an output of the process. Clearly we'd be curious what the dollar number that
Right.
comes from that would look like today, realizing that, the changes in design simplification may help on that front further, but where we're at as we stand now.
Just one other comment. We do know that the space summary that we did agree to reduce the space summary by the amount of square footage in the maker space and alt PE. So that brings us down to a little bit more than 139,000 square feet. You then have to add back, what we're putting, what the ads are for the auditorium and for the gym. So we do at least have the 139,000 number kind of baked, I believe, from the last meeting.
Yep, and that's the 2,600 reduction.
That's 2,600
1,000.
net, and that's correct. 2,600 net reduction,
Net.
brings us down to, 139,000 and change. I would ask that as we do this gym stuff, that we sketch out the designs for the alternate designs. If there are going to be several that we're going to look at, we should sketch those out, and we should be able to see them as a committee, along with the assumptions behind them, because there was some issue with the understanding of what MIAA is saying and what MIAA is not saying. I did look up the rules, so I know what the rules are, and I think they were a bit. I think we were a bit stumbling on what MIAA is requiring versus not requiring. So I think we do know that now, and we have access to those rules, so that should help. But let's get the designs on a piece of paper so we can see them.
Yep, and so I would say same with the auditorium. We need to see both as.
Yes, yes,
are.
absolutely. That's right. Auditorium too.
Yep. Okay. So with that, Kristen, were there any other left to be studied immediately in SD items that I've overlooked, or anything that anyone's aware of? If not, then
I do have one other. If we're going into, if this is a launch point discussion, what is our launch point into schematic design? I think that we have discussed the $100 million upper limit. It's my understanding, coming out of these FinCom meetings and select board meetings and school committee discussions and our own discussions, that 100 million is the upper limit that we are that is our objective. You never necessarily meet all your objectives, but 100 million is the number that I understand it, that we're focused on. And maybe that's not right. Maybe it's some other number. But I believe, we got the message loud and clear, and I think it's good to have both the square feet and the budget number as the two pieces of the launch point.
It's my understanding that as we go into schematic design and we start to get more detailed on what this building's actually going to look like, that we'll be able to refine, and that 100 million is a target. But I guess where I'm going with this is I'd like to see what the presentation is from SMMA, and then see what people feel is left out, or what people feel we need to focus on. Because for me, I need to see sort of where we're going before I can sort of understand where I feel like I need more information.
But I would ask that, 100 million, you have to have some sort of number that you're working toward. And, I suppose, if we think about, streamlining the building at this point, if we have the space number and we have a cost issue, the only other variable we have, unless we're going to cut more space, is to streamline the building. So that's the only leverage left is streamlining, and you have to do it to some sort of number. Now, that doesn't mean you have to achieve that number. You can agree to not achieve that number, but you need a number. You need something to focus on. And I think it's appropriate that we hold on to 100 million, given the comments from those committees, and given our own number of 100 million that we maintained for a full year. So for what it's worth, I mean, I think it's good to keep that in front of us.
I mean, I think for me, I'm not comfortable cutting any more space. I mean, educationally, I think we're in a place where the building size meets the educational plan. We've made some adjustments per Lori and Justin and the educational team, you know, recognizing that they'll offer services in other spaces in the spirit of, you know, trying to bring us closer to the number that we were trying to hit, and then upping some of the spaces based on the, you know, community feedback we received. And we're going to do our best to be as close to 100 as we can, but, you know, I don't know that that should come at the risk of cutting more space. And absolutely, we'll look at design features and simplicity and, you know, just smart decisions now that will help our budget.
I agree. I totally agree with
Can I
you.
just say, I feel
Yeah.
like we had this debate last time and voted on it. I
Yeah,
don't feel like I can debate process anymore until I hear what Kristen says about what our process is. I just feel like we need to hear what she has to say.
Just one other comment on space. I too agree that we were done with space. So, you know, I think we've finished that discussion. I think what's left is how we continue to manage to that number, given what we can do to affect our result. And we'll just have to see, but it's nothing wrong with having a number that we rally around, that we try to shoot for.
okay, Kristen, can I turn it over to you, please?
Absolutely. And then we can, once we go through the presentation, we can always come back to make sure that those questions are addressed if they are not through this process. So one thing that I wanted to go ahead and put up first and foremost is that we have achieved the earlier release date in our target of May 10th for schematic design, thanks to everyone's hard work in April and really meeting a few weeks in a row to make sure that we had the scope and the goals for the project developed. So this is the schedule that we're tracking right now. We'll continue to work with Stephen and the co-chairs to pin down a special town meeting and election dates, assuming that we stay with that process and that track. And so this is just the schedule that we're going to be working toward and providing updates on as we refine the approval process. I think it's important, back in feasibility study, we had a table that showed feasibility study decisions and then schematic design decisions. So this kind of extracts those schematic design decisions and highlights them a bit more. We do a deeper dive into programmatic adjacencies, which is, what spaces want to be near what. We did, of course, a first pass based on information we had in our feasibility study floor plans. But there are, we're going to have a lot more work to do with Justin on, where does the guidance council office really go? Some prefer distributed admin, some prefer centralized admin. And so we're going to be working through some of those adjacencies and in the floor plan and continue to evolve the floor plans in that way. We're going to talk more about entrances and exits. In terms of main entrances, secondary entrances, sometimes there'll be one for the more community facing spaces for the after hours use, and sometimes it's still in one central location. We'll talk about those. As part of the MSBA process, which is a process that we are following per the RFS, it was asked that this project follow the MSBA steps and processes. The MSBA likes to make sure that you've checked off the expansion potential in locations. Some schools will plan for an extra wing, or they'll plan through an extra floor or something like that. So we'll have that conversation and make sure that we are achieving your goals in terms of expansion potential if there is a desire for that. Site plan design, I know we left off with some open conversations about parking, and we'll continue to dive into the details of parking as we lay out the site in more detail and talk more about the teacher counts, visitors, and so on, and continue to evolve the site design. driveways and circulation, there's a lot more to talk about in terms of parent pickup and drop off and buses and so on. So that will be worked out, fields and program. I think we have a really good start on that from the work with the athletic directors in the previous study, and then the layout of the site, the party, everything works very well right now, but we'll make sure to refine that. Questions come regarding bleachers or dugouts or fencing types and lighting and things like that. So we'll be looking at all of that. Exterior and interior design. Now we're actually going to start talking about material selection, and Charlie, to your point, some of this will go toward cost. You know, we'll show other typical schools precedents. We'll look at schools in your community. We'll provide some suggestions on materials. Also of consideration is life cycle cost for those materials. Some communities, even though rubber is a higher cost per square foot for flooring, it is durable, and some will just not waver from that. Some are more comfortable with something that is just, you know, your typical VCT or so on. So we'll have in-depth conversations about materials in terms of durability, maintenance, cost, and aesthetic. So a lot of conversations there. We're going to go into a deeper dive with the easy code goals that the sustainability subcommittee set forth in terms of the system types, because even though we know we're looking at a VRF as our baseline, we're still going to be doing life cycle cost analysis, and there's different ways to provide VRF systems and centralized and so on. So a lot of that talking about sustainability options, EV charging stations, and so on. So and then lastly, we'll do a deeper dive now into safety and security. This is typically with your fire department and police department and any school security experts and technology folks about cameras, and you know, every district has different camera policies and so on. So we'll be looking at passive and active security measures. And basically the list of items that we're looking to collect will find itself into building narratives, system narratives. The floor plans at Schematic Design are still very much floor plans. You don't get mechanical drawings with ducts and so on, but you get floor plans that are very much worked out to capture space and all the space decisions and systems decisions. And then a lot of this works itself into specifications and narratives. And the goal is that there's sufficient detail that this submission packet at the end of Schematic Design for cost estimating gives the estimators, of which we will have two. Two estimators will independently estimate and then come up with estimates, and it should provide enough detail for them to give us a good roadmap for DD through CA. So then as part of cost management processes, concurrently with developing the drawings, specs, and the report that provides that information for the estimators, we also concurrently develop a VE list. So with our estimating set, we will be working with you to develop a value engineering list. And the value engineering list will have adds, it will have deducts, it will have just parametric things like, oh, if we have a lot of trees shown on the site, then we'll put a line item there for 50% of the trees or 50% of the plantings and things like that, so that at the end of estimating, when we get the estimates back, wherever you land, you have another menu of items of nice to haves or deducts that you can take to adjust to what your target budget is at that time. But the fact is, we have a lot of work to do in the next 4 months to even get enough information to develop that. And then a lot of that cost discussion and value discussion comes toward the end. Of course, any of your basis of design work should be in the primary narratives and schematic design and so on. The VE list should really just be nuances or alternatives. But we will work throughout the next 4 months to make sure that cost is also part of the conversation when we review systems.
Kristen, can I just chime in on that VE list? That's normal. The MSBA requires that you have some sort of list in your documents that gets you, that gives you an alternative if you are over in your estimate, or if not, like they ask that you provide that. So that's normal. And I would just make the suggestion that as the as groups are making decisions or recommendations, that if you're saying, well, example, the flooring material, we're going to pick the middle of the road because it's more durable and maybe it costs a little more up front, but if we're in a bind, then let's put the cost alternative on a VE list so that we know, like, we would be okay with making that decision if we had to. So that VE list is an evolution and is happening as we're making decisions, so that in the end, it's not just randomly picking saying, oh, we're over, and I'm just saying not every project's over budget, but if you are, it's, you go into it with a list that you've already made decisions about. So just as a suggestion.
Yep. Yeah, and they are living documents and they're handy to have, and they are done at every stage of design. So even after schematic design, when we work through design development and even more details folded in, new VE items will emerge because of that additional level of detail and development. So it is absolutely part of the process, and we'll, have that developing alongside of everything.
I just didn't want anyone thinking, oh, we're already making a VE list. Like, that's normal.
Very, very typical.
Yes, and it's part of the, the requirements under MSBA. So sorry, thank you for letting me say that. I just
absolutely, yeah, and all the way through the end, you just can't, especially with the market being what it is. We just need to be responsible all the way through the end, and that has been something we've been doing for 20 years on school projects. I see Matt has a question. Do we want to hold or do questions in or throughout, Don?
Yeah, we could take questions unless you're uncomfortable with it and want to get through the whole thing, but
No, I think this is a fine point. Yeah.
Okay, Matt.
Thank you. Thank you, Kristen. I just a quick question. When would be the first time we would see the a cost estimate based on the schematic design?
So our estimating only starts out here in October. And so your first estimate is going to be in the fall.
It only gets estimated once in SD, Matt.
Yep.
Yeah.
That being said, we do LCCA, or life cycle cost analysis, as we walk through all the system types. And so we do work with our cost estimators to make sure that we're comparing systems on a cost per square foot basis to provide that information. So you do get kind of that sprinkling of cost, but the full estimate is only in the fall.
May I ask a follow-up, please?
Sure.
Sure, Court.
Kristen, could you speak briefly to the 555 number? One, is it normal to have that number be unchanged for so many months, or does it in some projects get refined routinely? And number two, do you need a range for us to be keeping in mind because of the volatile times in the industry right now? I'm struck that 555 number has been with us, I think, for about a year now.
Yeah, it's certainly been with us as a target. The cost materials that we've been providing actually have it at 559. So to your point, Court, with the escalation that from one year to the next, and just all of the updates with materials and everything, we arrived at 559. And that, when we last did our back of the napkin math cost summary, the educational plan space summary that we had in March, that with the 559 was at your $100 million target. So we were tracking 559, and so that's true. We were going to continue to be looking at the cost as we go through these decisions, because in fact we didn't have decisions on materials at the time. So it's not unrealistic that you could get to 555 depending on market conditions. So that's one part of your question, and the other part is no, it's not typical to that 555 was an all-in construction cost that included escalation. And so when a project schedule has changed like this one has, you would not be able to keep something like that the same without performing program cuts, because again, escalation is something we cannot change. So so now that we're on a schedule that we're going to be maintaining, once we hit schematic design and we arrive at a project cost and project budget, construction cost and budget, that will be our fixed cost. And that will then not change. That is going to be what we design to, because that is what your town meeting will have approved. That will be what your town members have approved. So between now and then, that number, it's very typical that it expands and contracts because we're doing all of this work to really scope the project.
Great. That's very helpful. And just a headline for something that I hope we'll get into at some point, and that is to minimize the October surprise, which you don't want, we don't want. I hope at some point sooner we'll talk about what's happened to contingency in this budget and if that has changed, but I'm not asking for that right now.
Yeah, at feasibility, we were carrying 12%, which is a very typical design contingency percentage for feasibility. And when we get to the end of schematic design, depending on how many decisions what the clarity of the decisions and the documents are and how comfortable the whole team really feels with everything, your schematic design contingency could drop from, it's certainly at 10 typically, and sometimes lower if the estimators feel like they have a really good handle on the market and on what your decisions are for the project.
I have just a couple quick ones too that I'd like to make. This is Charlie. First, the 559 is different than the 555. And I know that you're saying that that was always your number, but the number that we were given by the OPM was 555. And I know that what Ian suggested, Ian can comment further on this, was somehow that was a challenge to us. We accepted the 555. And I think that as a team that we have agreed to the 555. So I guess I'm a little bit wary about bringing new numbers, even though there might be your number, bringing new numbers into the fold. So that
I think sorry, Charlie, but I think what she's saying is that the numbers they costed out in feasibility was at 559 and that our target cost that we're trying to hit is 555. I don't think we're saying that we're going to 559. I think she's saying at a space and time at feasibility, when the estimators ran the numbers, that's what they were run at with the decisions that were made at that time.
Okay, good. Well, that's good. Thank you for that. Second,
correct me if I'm wrong, Kristen, but that's how I understood it.
Nope, that's based on what we knew at the time. Yeah.
okay,
Great,
so
thanks.
then the second comment is relative, just a clarification on the value engineering scope. I assume that value engineering would include some of the bigger items as well, like let's change this major design feature of the building, such as, I don't know, the people have singled out the bridge from time to time. I'm not picking on the bridge, but I assume that it would include items like that. Is that true?
No, the floor plan development and the massing and everything of the building, that will be worked on early in the summer, and that will be that's not changed. You can see sometimes where at the end of schematic design, if the committee feels very strongly about it, I have seen some communities say we want to reduce by 500 square feet because we see we can pull it out of this, but it's a program impact. When that happens, those are program impacts.
Well, that's helpful to know. So we're really talking about things like finishes and trees and other minor changes, potentially at HVAC or whatever, how much air conditioning and so forth and so on. It's more of the minor things as opposed to major structural opportunities, correct?
And you'll find that in the exterior interior design group that meets, that those conversations about the shape of the building, the massing, and the floor plans will occur. So there's going to be very much opportunity to discuss that, and also the team that is designing this building has been designing schools for a long time, and they're working with an efficiency factor. They're working with that net to gross of 1.5. You know, right now, the building with the elevated corridor, because it is in fact a corridor, that is within the square footage of the spaces that you all agree are part of this school, plus, with the 1.5 multiplier. So it's not that corridor does not add to the space or anything, because that's a necessary circulation element.
So I'm not picking on any particular item. I'm just.
Oh,
trying-
and right, and I'm following up with your example,
Yeah.
just that we work to maintain that space summary square footage and make it more efficient where we can.
Okay.
And
But
to
Charlie, an example of something that could change if we were, and this is, I don't do parapets, but as an example, if you wanted, you know, a parapet on, you know, that the sides of your building would be taller and then the roof is sunken in and provide, that could be a VE item where you say, oh, reduce that because it's adding steel, it's adding materials, it's adding that. I could see being a potential VE option, something along those lines. But I think major design decisions get flushed out in SD, and you don't want to extract huge pieces of the building as, you know, design elements. So that's part of the decision making and discussion, as Kristen said. And, you know, if there are decisions that are made for a reason, but with recognition that, oh, if we're over budget, then, you know, I often will carry X amount of interior glazing as an example, like however many square feet. And then I'll say, if we're over budget, I'll reduce it by 75%, you know, 25%. So I can keep 75% of what I'm doing. So sometimes there's I don't want to call it a game, but there's a process when you do this all the time that you say, I'm going to put in what I want, and then recognize that if I need to pull back, I'll do it in a percentage way, you know, of interior glazing, again, as an example. So those are the types of decisions that would get made in a VE scenario.
Okay, that's helpful.
Great.
Thank you.
Yep.
Kristen, I assume you had more that you were looking to present?
Just a few things.
Yep.
So already underway, I think it's critical to know that Phil Poinelli, our educational planner and programmer, performs SD programming. So in feasibility study, there was some engagement with the teachers to say, you know, how do you teach, and kind of to flesh out space information related to the ed plan that we received. Now we do kind of a deeper dive and say, well, how do you, you know, do you teach on stools with casters or fixed stools, and, you know, do just kind of more about the rooms themselves. And so our educational planner will be meeting with the teachers. He's formed questionnaires and things like that, and just doing a deeper dive with the teachers and staff, again, to understand exactly how the nurse's office works. Is it an exam table or a cot? You know, so a lot of those things get flushed out right now as well. And those inform, you know, some of those items that I named inform a furniture budget, which will also be part of the conversation.
Kristen, is it fair to say that that's where the room data sheets come in? That's something that probably most people on this meeting don't know what those are, but I saw it in your list, you know, one of your earlier slides. And that's basically an enlarged plan of each individual space that as these meetings happen, they evolve. And you're saying, like, the nurse's suite is a perfect example. You come in, what's the process of checking a student in, especially nowadays with COVID? Like, what's the process? What do you need right there? You need a sink. What if the child's bleeding? You need Band-Aids and first aid, and you need a little counter there with a sink. So those are the type of things, but it comes with an enlarged plan and then a bunch of information. It might talk about the systems. What are there window blinds? Are there, you know, like, what kind of technology is in that room? So those room data sheet, yep, there it is, perfect. Under in the report, there are 8.5 by 11 with every single type of space. Now, a typical classroom, there's going to be a ton of those in the building, but there'll be one plan for each typical type. So there'll be a science one, there'll be a general classroom. There's, you know, all the different music rooms, the different art rooms. So you can expect to see that level of detail in schematic design. At the end of it, the process will land us in a place where those are a deliverable, and you can literally look at each type of room in the room data sheets.
Great.
That's very much what I do for a living. So
Yeah.
you can tell I spend many days in room data sheets, but there's a lot of information there. So, you know,
And they'll
you'll
talk about the acoustic needs for
Yep,
any space as well.
absolutely. What type of ceiling, like how high are the ceilings, you know, so there's a lot of information in those, and we'll provide a lot of clarity about the details within each space of the building.
Great. So so that's already ongoing, and we got a jump on that really quickly because we need to complete that before the teachers and staff release for the summer. And so a lot of that work is happening now, thanks to Justin helping us organize everything, and so we'll have that feedback. And then also, based on where we left off with, again, the space summary baseline, plus the recipe of spaces, as Matt mentioned, we are already studying the floor plan updates because the reason why it would be difficult to provide a space summary right now, and we can certainly provide a point in time, but it's that it does evolve, especially for an auditorium, where the efficiency of the space, the type of seating, how many rows for walking, and all of that informs your net to gross for an auditorium. So right now we have, for example, 12 square foot per seat as a placeholder. But when that's laid out, depending on how, how it fits within the footprint of the building and all of the decisions made through the schematic design process, we may get it to 11 square foot per seat or something like that. So again, we've been conservative in the space summary, but those are some of those refinements and efficiencies that will come out of the schematic design process and programming.
What space summary are we going to show the public in June? And will we have seen that first?
So it would be, I can certainly send, again, I can send out what is a placeholder for now, and it would reflect all the items that we had already in March, minus the alt PE, minus the makerspace, and then with the adjustment to the auditorium and gym.
And then that will have the target budget number as a result of that those program changes. It's just like, that's what I was hoping we'd see today. I just, I'd hate to see it for the first time in the public forum.
Sure. So now that, so we consider that part of the evolving process. And so we, the costs we had discussed at length in the last meeting. So I apologize. I didn't realize that there was still a lack of kind of feeling completely clear on everything, but I understand. So maybe we can just circulate that after this meeting. And if there's any major concerns about presenting it to the public without further discussion, we can absolutely just be presenting the schematic design process as I am to you now today without the space summary. But we can, my plan would be at the public forum to represent the decisions of the committee to the recipe, not to say these are the fixed costs and these are the fixed square foot decisions, because we just can't do that.
Hey, Matt, I think the only unknown in those numbers and in that space summary is the exact size of the gym at this point.
We're talking about
I got an auditorium per seat. I'm not an architect. I just, I feel like I thought that we had a feasibility phase. It ended with a certain number of deliverables, and I don't feel like I've got them. So, and I don't really know. It seems very fuzzy right now in terms of, we're going forward to the public, and I don't know. I lost a little bit.
Perhaps we could address that, Dawn, with some clear understanding of what this committee will do by way of approving what goes before the public in June. So there is a clear marker such that we release it. It's not an implied agreement with what comes forth in June, but rather a clearly expressed one might help a great deal.
Yeah, and again, we were trying to meet the educational plan, we were trying to meet community needs, and we were trying to stay, as close as we could and hopefully meet this $100 million target. And I don't really know where we landed.
So I think Kristen, as a placeholder for the auditorium, you've been carrying 12 square feet per seat. And at 420, we're at 5,040 net, right? So that's the plan right now on the auditorium. The gymnasium, you had 10,006, but I think there was an idea that could be reduced. I think Charlie had done some sketching and some math based on, dimensional numbers that were, remind me, Charlie, where your numbers were. I want to say
Mine was 90 feet
90.
by 2.
Yeah.
And it includes reduced runouts to 6 feet at the end of the court, and reduced to the curtain to 3 feet. So
what was the net?
The net, what's the net?
The net square footage?
Well, whatever. Well, 91, let's see. Yeah, it was 9180.
91.8. So we're somewhere between just over 9,000 and just over 10,000. So I think that's the clarity on those dimensions, Kristen. So I'm going to ask that you work to clarify that in short order, and that we get a space template with those revised numbers. The reduction of the 1,000 makerspace, the reduction of the 1,600 alt PE, the increase on the auditorium to 5,040 net, and then the gymnasium is somewhere between 9 and 10.5 thousand net. So that's the
And so we'll
that's the
present,
number that's in
and,
question right now, in
and
my
again,
mind anyway.
And we'll present a range. Again, this is a process. It's not, there is no, it's going to evolve. And so I think that the best thing to do is I'm an advocate for transparency and for clarity. And so I think we should present a range where we left off with the nuances of the gym and the auditorium, and say that, we're going to keep on working with your building committee throughout this to make it as efficient and cost effective as possible. That's always our goal.
Why can't we make a decision on the gym one way or the other in terms of it's either A, B, or C? Then we know what the gym is. It's a big number. Why do we have to have a range, for example, on the gym? Maybe I don't understand what you're saying.
Because
why can't the committee make a decision next time we meet? Take a look at your drawings and decide what makes sense.
And we can do that next time we meet, but it would not be in advance of the public forum as scheduled.
Oh, okay, got
Yeah,
it.
we're not saying that we
I
won't be making these decisions. We just need a process. We need to involve the athletic directors. We need to follow up with you with the drawings. Those all take time.
Okay, I understand.
It's a lot of changes.
Good.
So did it sound like in terms of the presentation to the community, is everyone comfortable with us presenting the range of?
Yeah, I think our range is okay for now. It's just, I think that there were a lot of people waiting for what was the conclusion of what we decided. And they'll have to settle for a range for now.
It's not I don't think it's a huge range. I think it's like 1,000 to 1,200 square foot range, which obviously our goal is to, maximize the capabilities within the gymnasium by as best we can, minimizing the square footage.
So it's roughly like $1 million range.
$1.5 million.
All right. Well, okay.
And we'll do that in terms of the program space summary. Again, when we lay out the mechanical rooms and decide where the equipment goes, if it's on the rooftop or in mechanical rooms or on site, those all make differences in the square footage because,
oh yeah, and
so all of those
we'll
things will
in schematic design, but
great. Yeah. So that's why we just find it important not pinpoint something, and especially as we're in this deeper investigation. So the floor plan studies and updates are already underway to answer some of these questions about auditorium and gym, and feedback is being collected from the staff, because I know, for example, we had a lot of feedback about whether orchestra and band should share with music or be separate, and those are things that are very important to work out because they do drive the size of those rooms, not in total, but individually. So all of that's happening right now so that we can prepare for our next meeting that presents to you a floor plan and some recommendations for conversation. So let's see, there's going to be a long process of floor plan and exterior and interior design studies and development over the summer. And then at the end, once we have several focus group meetings, which I'll speak to shortly, we'll be summarizing all of that in the project narratives and specs and putting together the estimating set. So concurrent with estimating is typically when we have our formal client review of the documents. And so that while the estimates are underway, you can be reviewing and asking questions about the documents and the quality. And then at the conclusion of that, we have this reconciliation in VE where the two estimators will meet and they will see where their differences are, negotiate, will be there along the way, clarifying scope and so on, and then also have that VE list. So at the conclusion, we'll circulate to you the draft estimates and then also the reconciled estimates to show where they landed, and then the VE list with recommendations. So we do typically rank the VE list because it's not unlike, there are some things that are on the VE list that will be ranked low because they're not, they're not as durable, or they're less sustainable, still sustainable, but less, on the range of things. And so we'll provide all of that information with the VE list so that we can have a conversation about what gets implemented and what doesn't. And then we're working toward that SD approval and the town funding approval and so on. So that brings me to the next most important topic, which is how we typically collect this information in schematic design. We typically create focus groups by area of expertise because we tend to need a lot of input. For example, on the site design, we would want the school's transportation director to be part of that meeting. Who can talk to us more about how many vans and buses and their approach and their hours. So the site design focus group, and then also town representatives, maybe from the DPW, the people who maintain grounds, will be in something like that. And they'll say, well, on our other schools, we had a really bad experience with pavers, and so we don't want to do that. So we get a lot of that input through these focus groups. And so we, part of the outcome of this meeting for me is to give you this introduction to the focus groups, and then ask that you, we can either in the meeting or after the meeting just collect names for who wants to be on which, so that I can then send out doodle polls to get them all scheduled. But I do want to make sure that the scope and content and the reason behind them is clear so that we can have that conversation during the meeting. But, we'll also, the site design focus group will also continue to look at the septic and the permitting issues and things like that. So those are all parts of site design where we really do need it to be a group that is really kind of rolling up their sleeves and getting into the detail. So that's on the site. Exterior and interior is going to be your most comprehensive group. That's going to be the one that reviews floor plans and massing and materials, and that's kind of that's the architectural group really. And so that will be led by Ewing Cole with, of course, an SMMA Matt Rice or Phil part of it as you go along. A lot of the conversation, the vibrant conversation, happens around what the look and the feel is of the dining commons or cafeteria, the media center, and so on. So that's a very exciting and visual group to be part of, because you're looking at building sections and massing and so on. FF&E and technology, that one tends to be a more school-facing one, just because, and also the school finance department will also be part of that because you're already ordering furniture and you have a technology director, and we'll need to know what camera systems are already used. Are we looking at a proprietary spec for cameras? You know, so all of that needs to be fed into the FF&E and technology focus group. Some people are very interested and excited about school furniture. There's a lot of fun stuff out there right now. So it can be fun to be part of, but we'll talk about things like how many seats per classroom and how many of them should be standing desks or how many should be wobble stools, and is there a, you know, an island that moves and so on. So that will be the FF&E and technology group. And then we have MEP and Sustainable Design Focus Group. I'm sure I'm anticipating a lot of the Sustainable Subcommittee members to be signing up for this one because this is where a lot of our sustainability conversations will take place, and the LCCAs around you know, systems and talking about water use reduction and things like that. So that's a very technical group, and we'd hope to see Russ in there as well, who, you know, again, owns maintenance and longevity and has experience with the systems in the other schools, or can bring that information to the group. The safety and security group, again, I think I mentioned that one, that tends to not really have a lot of, that tends to really just focus with this police, fire, and the school department. Also just because it's important that that information, you know, there's only so much that should be discussed in a public realm in terms of safety and security. I'm sure you can imagine. It's just important that we get the information on what systems are in place, what the policies are, and so on. So that's typically just 2 meetings because it doesn't take a lot to understand what is already used and how that is implemented in the design. So I do have, you know, Ewing Cole, because they do have a huge portion of this work with the exterior and interior design focus group. They do have a layout of what they would like to see for a meeting rhythm and overall the kind of what they expect to handle in each of the meetings. So I did provide that in the packet. In general, the rhythm is to meet every 3 weeks, and then to handle these topics like this plan refinement and program summary. That's going to be your first one. We'd very much like to keep that one at June 24th, just because it's the nearest meeting date. And from there on out, we will use a doodle poll to see what works best for everyone. But we do know that Thursday mornings was working well for many. So, and then we already talked quite a bit about the educational programming, I think, so there might not be anything else to review. So we can go back to the focus groups now, or any part of this, and maybe I'll even unshare my screen so that we can dialogue more about those. I'm sorry, I should say one more thing is I would anticipate that the building committee will continue to meet monthly. And so once these focus groups are laid out, then I would make sure that the building committee meetings don't conflict and that they're at a point in time when information from the focus groups can be very easily summarized. And so the focus groups will come back with that information to the building committee and ask if there are any questions or if there are any concerns before we proceed with next steps on any of the items.
Kristen, just for clarity, these groups, there's no chair. It's not like a subcommittee in the sense that there's a chair that creates an agenda. This is driven by the designers that are looking for specific decisions at specific times and saying, so these meetings will be posted within an agenda item that maybe is exterior materials. I'm just throwing something out there that, you know, the part of the building is, you know, around picking the exterior materials on that particular day, or at least having discussion about them. Maybe decisions are not made at that meeting, but options are presented, and then the next meeting decisions are made, as an example. So, okay.
And to that end, I think it's important to note that, you know, it's important that we have those focus groups with the ability to get your director of technology and so on in the room, because that is the person that you need making the decision. I would feel very uncomfortable if I were making that decision alone in a vacuum, because you should be relying, I think, on your on who is in that role in your community to really advise. And there is constant review by the OPM. You know, Hill and our team will always be reviewing to make sure that it's within reason, the asks, and not something over the top. And if they are over the top and they're nice to haves, those will be items that you'll see on the VE list. So we make sure, you know, we're steeped in school design experience and have a lot of other comps. So we'll make sure to get all the information to you and make sure that it's still, you know, on target for your goals. Pat?
Yeah, because there's a lot of interest from the community, I know around the hardwiring of the building versus being all Wi-Fi or whatever, where does that come into these focus groups, and how does that input get dealt with?
I think similar to how you've been treating your building committee information. As you receive the information, we've been forwarded that information. We'll take it into account. We'll have that conversation in the focus group with how the other schools, what are the school policies, what are town policies, where's the town going with it. So I think that town and school input is very key. And then we would bring something like that back to the building committee and make sure that there's consensus around the approach. And again, so that all of that would be very available to the community to provide continued input or feedback. But in the end, those kind of decisions, I think we'd be looking for the building committee to let us know if anything is problematic, but we'd be coming with a recommendation from the experts.
Okay. And
which focus group would that land in? I didn't mean to interrupt.
FF&E and technology.
that's what I thought. Thank you.
And I think it's important to note that each of these groups, someone might say, oh, well, you know, there's a design subcommittee. Why wouldn't it just happen under that umbrella? And I think it's fair to say that that group simply cannot do all this work and make all those decisions, because it's just, there are too many to be made. And there needs to be a broader net of people that are involved, including non-building committee members that are, you know, experienced and experts in that particular field. Your example, the technology director, or the, you know, the head of the bus and transportation. So this is an avenue for decision making and expedition of lots of answers and decisions, so that the designers can get us to the end of schematic design.
And when there's a design review board in town, for example, something that's coming down the road in terms of permitting, then it's always great to have a liaison from your permitting ZBA or so on, or planning department in those kinds of meetings to say, you know, you missed the signage guidelines or something like that. So we'll keep in touch with the town departments on that, but that's another example of who might tie into something like this. I think we had Matt and then Court.
Hey, Kristen. Can you just talk a little bit more about the difference between the focus groups and the subcommittees? I mean, I understand the need to bring in other voices, but like, so if a subcommittee makes a recommendation, does the subcommittee also need to attend the focus groups as well? How do the two work together, I guess, to inform your team?
Yeah, so we don't see, I think that, you know, thinking, of course, since you're asking the question, I'm going to adjust to a sustainability subcommittee example, but I would again think that many of your members would just be on that working group. There would not be a need for subcommittee meetings. Typically, these focus groups are not actually publicly posted, because they are really just rolling up the sleeves and working through data and iterative in a way. And so the subcommittees are, from feasibility, are all members of the building committee, and all members of the building committee can join these focus groups. So we really feel like you have the opportunity to get involved with these focus groups with the addition of those experts, you know, that would be so helpful to participate in the working groups, and then it would all come back. And I'm sure that when we come back to the building committee, if there's a recommendation that came out of the focus group, they would be leaning on members who are sustainability experts to be supporting that in the building committee environment. So the short answer is there wouldn't be a need for formal subcommittees, because we'd be working through these design decisions and design development in the focus groups.
And so, sorry, just a few follow-up questions then, but the focus groups are not open to the public, right? It's members of this larger committee and then by special invitation?
Yep, typically they will be town employees, school employees and building committee folks as needed to develop the answers.
And then do we have to sign up for each focus group, or can we attend, you know, like can we attend individual meetings as we are interested?
Because they'll be posted, anyone can go to any one of them. But I do want to develop a core group so that we can schedule them and have a you know, kind of a group that I know we can rely on for working with you and getting the answers that we need. So I am, you know, we'll certainly make sure that we have the technology transportation director and all of those people on the list, working with Lori and working with Stephen from, you know, for town. Elizabeth Hughes will probably help us staff some of these. But in terms of the building committee, it's completely up to you, but we would be looking for kind of a core commitment.
Thank you.
I think it's my turn. Anytime a public committee has to remind our audience that we are transparent, makes me worry about our efforts to be transparent. I think we should just be transparent, and I think it should be completely self-evident that we're transparent in our efforts. The idea that a subcommittee can't make decisions, so we need a focus group to make decisions, seems to upend the entire purpose of the middle school building committee. I have no objection to bringing in expert talent, but I am deeply concerned about what this means actually for our transparency and for open meeting law. So I am keen on bringing in all the expertise we need, but the implication here is that the formal responsible group is no longer capable of making decisions, and that we're going to offload this to something that is very private. You can visit, but you need an invitation to participate. It doesn't bode well for this project.
I don't think that's at all
Sorry,
what she
can
was
we
saying,
clarify?
Court.
Because I just think I have a different understanding of
But
it.
yeah, let me tell you what I heard Dawn say. The design subcommittee can't make these kinds of decisions, so a focus group will replace it. Now, correct me if I'm wrong.
I
Is that
said
not
there's
what I
too
heard?
many decisions without experts in the room for one committee to make all the decisions for.
Correct. So we're going to replace a appointed group with a group selected by whom? I don't think it is shaping up very well for this entire project.
Wait, can I, sorry, just jump in with my understanding of it and be corrected if I'm wrong? Because I think, I'm not trying to debate you, Court. I agree, we need to make sure we're transparent. I think I heard all this and came away with a totally different understanding of it than you did. So let's make sure we're all hearing it correctly, which I may not be. My understanding, I think Kristen said these would all be posted. So I understood I guess the high level understanding for me was more similar to the subcommittees, but with a broader participation of experts who aren't on the building committee. So not to say that we're going more private, and if they're posted publicly, I don't think that's any different from how the subcommittees have been working. And in terms of who's choosing, I think Kristen said she wanted to hear from each of us on which ones we wanted to be on. So I heard it as, and again, this isn't to debate transparency. Obviously, I'm very committed to transparency here. I heard it as, let's include more people in this, and it will still be public, just like the subcommittees, but we're bringing in experts. And that's why we're calling it
Well,
a focus
bringing,
group to
yeah,
inform each of these.
agreed, but bringing in experts to reinforce sustainability or design or finance or communication or the other subcommittees is quite different than determining that these subcommittees are not capable of making these kinds of decisions and that focus groups will enter into this space instead. That's what I heard. Okay.
I understood it as Heather understood it. Lori?
I'm just, yeah, all right, Lori.
Oh, sorry.
No, go
I
ahead,
wonder
Lori.
if there's a combination of the two, where as these focus groups, because I see the workload, it looks really large. Is there a place where the subcommittee could hear an update without slowing down the work? Because the work can't slow down. We all know the schedule has to keep going. So that's the concern though, right? That's the trick. If the subcommittee is going to hear the work of the focus group, how do we stop any back and forth from going on? I think, is there a way? I don't know the answer to that. So I'm asking those of you who do this and try to keep us on schedule.
I can't support the subcommittees being relegated to suddenly a very subordinate role to focus groups. So I support your idea, Lori, that we've got to find a way to not have that happen.
I don't know exactly what it looks like, but it seems like maybe there's a middle here somewhere.
Can I ask a quick question? Just a plain old question. We're using the terms working group and focus group. Are these two groups the same, or do we have two different groups?
You know, it's actually it's a legal nuance. Focus group and working group have different meanings to the inspector general or something. So we've been, you know, using focus groups as this kind of a body, just because it's a more flexible term. Working groups has received a lot of legal connotation, but you know, since these meetings would be posted and available to the public, and I don't see any, you know.
So there's only one set of meetings for each set of topics.
Right.
And it's called the focus group. Working group is, forget about it. You know, we're
Yep.
not using that term. We
Yeah.
have one alternate group and we don't have subcommittees. That is the proposal for our operating going forward.
Yeah, and it's really, again, the redesign and the reorganization is really to do this deeper dive into topics so that we can get the information we need for the cost estimate and the development of the design. So, you know, keeping to what they were previously doesn't give us the absolute flexibility to really zero in. You know, there's a different group that's interested in site design and development than exterior and interior design, and different than FF&E. So we're just looking to make sure that we give everyone the ability to participate in and represent on the focus groups that they're interested in and have expertise in.
So then who would be, let's just take it a step further. Who would be the leader? Let's take an example of, let's say, the sustainability focus group. I think you should call it sustainability.
Yep. MEP and sustainability focus group.
Yes.
That one would be organized by me. It would be led by me or our lead architect. And then in terms of just managing the meeting flow, but we would be having our mechanical engineer, electrical, plumbing, and so on all come in with their contribution, their questions, their information. And
So
Martine,
these would be your meetings, so to speak.
and we'd be developing the meeting agendas and minutes. Yep,
Okay.
and materials.
Okay.
I see Ian's hand up.
Oh yeah.
I think Ian has something to add to this.
Oh, Ian, you're on mute.
Yep, I got you. Sorry. Yeah, I guess I wanted to take a step back and kind of think through this a little bit and add to the conversation here. So, where we were at before with the feasibility study is, you know, we were looking at things conceptually and kind of big picture budget and space summary and that sort of thing. And so as we move into schematic design, we are, you know, basically what we're doing is we're giving our architect the ability to meet and have these focus groups and gather information and kind of pull together the details of the building and the next step here. So as such, I would see SMMA really taking charge of this process. And that's what Kristen's laying out today is, you know, they're the ones that are going to be facilitating these focus groups, and they're going to be bringing in the right parts of their team to meet with individuals that can add to these different focus groups. So I would see this as a normal part of schematic design and the process here. And you know, I guess I'm not seeing the issues with the way this is being laid out as it just being a normal part of the design process and iterations here. So it kind of takes it away from subcommittee and individual subcommittee controlled discussions and groups and hands it over to the designer and lets them run with it. And we should stand behind that. And that's, you know, the typical process.
Stephen, you've had your hand up. Do you?
Yeah, actually, I was gonna kind of say what Ian just said, just not nearly as well. I was going to use, Charlie, a different example to illustrate the point. Because Kristen mentioned, you know, town staff getting involved. The one that I know is going to be a big deal that doesn't get talked about a lot is wastewater. As you know, the school site is near one of our wells. And so wastewater management, septic system type stuff is going to be a big deal. And so we're going to have a focus group, or there's going to be a focus group with members of our water and wastewater team from CPW. They are not members of this committee. They're not members of the design subcommittee. And I don't know that either this committee or the design subcommittee possesses the technical knowledge and the system knowledge that that group possesses. And so that input is required to help design this project. And so that takes place in a focus group environment. I don't view it as a subordination. It's just a different role. And so I do think, Court, that some kind of, excuse me, you know, periodic report outs of these focus groups to the design subcommittee, you know, is something that I think would be, you know, a value added for the project. You know, as long as we maintain the schedule. But it's just a different tool to get to the same end that I think we all want to get to. So to me, that's the example of something that really, those people need to be involved in that process, and they're not on any of the existing committees. And they have to be able to have the space to have detailed conversations with our designers and our OPM about what's out there and what needs to be done.
And Stephen, you mentioned my name, so I'll respond and say, I think it's unimaginable that anybody would not want all the expert talent we can bring into this process. I'm instead trying to understand the structure that's being changed right now. So yeah, all for the expertise, and thankfully we have it, certainly.
Chris, you've had your hand up for a while. Chris Popov.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing is we have maybe a functional equivalent of our prior subcommittee structure melded in with getting all the experts. So the process would be, as we go through these details and one focus group comes up with something that has to be decided by the whole building committee, that would be presented at a regular building committee meeting, for example. So we keep moving the process along that way. So I think that's what I'm hearing so far. One of my questions about having it open to the public. So anybody can attend and listen in on the focus groups. That's all well and good, and that goes to transparency. My concern, and this might be a question for town council, is running afoul of open meeting law to say, well, for example, folks can attend and watch a focus group, but for example, unlike in a typical open meeting, there wouldn't be a public comment period. Public might be able to send comments in advance and we'd have written things, but there wouldn't be part of a focus group saying, now that we've gone through some of our technical stuff, let's now turn to a public comment period. And I think, picking up what Court says, if we were to go that direction, we want to be really clear that we're not running afoul of that. And then maybe I'll defer to Kristen. If this is something you've regularly in a lot of other towns, has it come up in other municipalities where people get concerned about not knowing what the focus group has decided? And then by the time the focus group brings it to the whole building committee, the public says, geez, you never considered any of my stuff, or I was shut out, or, you know, the usual arguments. It just wasn't as clear and transparent as it could have been. Thanks.
Chris, before I let Kristen respond, I had the same question. And to be honest with you, I had a bunch of questions for Kristen and others, and, you know, Lori, and I should reach out to Stephen because I don't know the answer. My focus groups on my projects are never public meetings. But as I understand it, Concord maybe operates in a different way, in that everything in the spirit of transparency, there's, you know, a desire to have all
hear from you on every single thing. Shithead. Shut up.
Wow. Can someone mute her?
So Don, to that point, I think one of the things, Chris, just to give you an example, there's going to be, I'm going to guess, a focus group on security systems and student safety and things like that. You know, there's a certain amount of discretion that needs to go into that discussion, and a certain amount of privacy. Like, you wouldn't, you know, design your home security systems and show all your neighbors where all the sensors are, and, you know, you just wouldn't, that's just not how that stuff gets done. And so that's an example of something that maybe is not suitable for a totally public, you know, discussion, but having a public discussion of, hey, the IT team and the police department met and they have developed a security system that we believe will protect our students and teachers, without having to provide the specific details of the system. I think that's those, and I guess based on my experience of public building projects, especially ones done by committees, there's got to be a little bit of trust in some of those details that get worked out that aren't necessarily suitable for public discussion for, I think, you know, bona fide reasons. Now, the ones that I think would benefit from public input greatly outnumber the ones that shouldn't be done in the public eye. But that said, just because we may have a couple of things that need to be done with a little more discretion, doesn't mean the whole thing is you know, non-transparent. I just, you know, sometimes I think it can get that brush can get pretty broad. And so I just want to kind of clarify a couple of examples of ways where it may be a different approach.
Yeah, sure. No, and I understand that, because even some of those, I won't speak for town council. One could say for security reasons, those might be exempt for all the reasons you say, Stephen, where, as you say, the vast majority of decisions about site plan and septic and water and all these things are all going to be in the public eye, and should be. There's nothing that raises security issues. You know, one could imagine maybe certain design features in building itself could feed into some of the other things we talk about in safety, security, maybe. But no, I certainly get that point. But I think given what Dawn was saying and so forth, that might be worth having some sort of opinion from town council, should that issue be raised, that we get to that point and somehow people are feeling like we're shut out of the process. Concord does have a history of lots of folks being concerned about following the open meeting law, public records, et cetera, as you well know, Stephen. Thanks.
I'm also, you know, just to follow up, Stephen, on your example, as I'm understanding this, the focus groups, and I like that view of, we had the subcommittees, we were discussing, the way Ian described it, we were discussing conceptual things. We were discussing you know, what is the ed plan going to translate to in terms of space? And we had some really vigorous considerations of what kind of spaces do we need or want in this school. And that brought us to schematics. Now that we're in schematics and we're going to be discussing very detailed pieces, it feels really different to me than the kinds of input that was happening in the subcommittees. So it makes a lot of sense to me that our focus groups are driven by our professionals and include those people who have expertise in particular areas, because there's not going to be there shouldn't be at this point a lot of controversy around what's going on in those focus groups. It's not so much a matter of opinion. However, there will be things that the citizens are going to want to have input in, or people will have strong feelings about. And I'll take security as an example, that you'll have, you know, you don't want to tell everybody how your security system works and all those details. But there will be people who will want to have input and understand what kind of data is being collected about their students, what images are being collected by their students, where are those images being stored. So my understanding is that while the focus group might come up with a recommendation, that it comes back to the broader committee to discuss that recommendation and give a forum for those kinds of questions. Same thing with the broadband versus the hardwired technology. There's going to be a lot of citizens who are going to want to have some input into that. So I guess I just want to clarify for myself that within the focus group structure, you can have open meetings. People can come and listen. I don't know where public comment fits into that. Maybe it can fit into that at the end of a meeting, but all of those decisions come back to the broader committee where people can weigh in and they can give their opinions just like they did with the auditorium and the gym. Kristen, is that the way it works in other towns? And, you know, I know that focus groups this is sort of de rigueur in the industry. Is that how it works, or?
So adding to others who have similar experience and already spoken up, focus groups in my experience aren't typically public, but that is a request that we're hearing from Concord. And so I think that's what we're working to accommodate and try and make possible. I think what maybe some of us have gotten so used to COVID, what we're forgetting a little bit is before a year ago, this was our landscape architect going to meet with the DPW in their office, you know, with plans rolled out on the table and a bunch of people huddling around. And that was kind of a focus group. And now with the digital version, so many people have so much more access, so much more easily, which is fantastic. But I think it actually creates this nuance and opportunity for more public involvement to have a recording of conversations on screen that's posted online. So I think I just want to recognize that this process difference in the last year has made a big difference to how we are working in the industry. So in my experience, they're not typically public, but we have no issue with making public what is safe to make public and presenting minutes. And so in other communities, even in the last year, the focus groups typically happen with the subject matter experts. Minutes are generated, the presentations and the decisions and the recommendations and all of that come to the building committee, and that's where it becomes a public element, to your point, Pat. It all comes if we have our building committee meetings once a month at the end of the month, you would see a roll up of all of the recommendations of the focus groups that happened during that month. And we'd be asking for input and comment on anything that was presented. And that's when you would have your typical public comment.
I think I should just mention that public comment is discretionary under open meeting law anyways, to have an open, a public comment period at a chaired meeting. Now, again, this focus group is an entity that's kind of outside of that. And I would say if we have any risk of running afoul of open meeting law. It's that you have this focus group meeting and a quorum of the building committee shows up and then opines on some issues. We are effectively at that point having an undeclared building committee meeting, and that would be a problem. Okay, so it is true that Zoom has changed the parameters of this significantly, and I totally understand where Kristen's coming from, and all the professionals, saying, well, gosh, we used to just go there and do this, and how else are we going to get it done? But now in the world of Zoom, we're kind of everything is in the public eye, and it complicates things. The thing I wondered is, it seems like, and again, I don't know if our structure is unique, but it would have seemed logical to me that these meetings, again, to connect with open meeting law, if you noticed them as design subcommittee meetings, inviting the experts relative to each of the agenda topics, and you discuss them, and then you make minutes, then, that kind of takes care of it. But it doesn't sound like we're doing it that way. We're not using the subcommittee structure. It would seem like if we're not going to use the subcommittee structure to take care of that process, we should probably dissolve the subcommittees, because they're not really doing anything at this point, other than taking reports.
Before we branch off and discuss that specific topic, I think it'd be good to understand a little bit more about what Kristen is proposing. I'm just going to ask a pointed question, and it has to do with governance and process for these focus group meetings. I assume that, just carrying forward this notion of, Kristen, you're the leader of the group that does sustainability, I would assume that we would evolve to where we have a fairly standard set of members of this group, and there could be other people that might come in and provide additional information, but you want this notion of the core group. So there's a sense of membership. I'm trying to get at the governance question here. So there's a sense of membership, and I would assume that we would vote on things. I would assume there would be motions, because there will be disagreement and there will be discussion and so forth. So I suppose the other model is we'll just talk and you'll listen, and then you'll go off and try to do the right thing. I guess that's another way of looking at it. But a more formal governance process would call for decision-making and recording of decisions, votes, and so forth. Which of these is the approach that is being proposed here?
I'll say votes in the focus groups are atypical, and the core membership is simply because we expect that those subject matter experts to help us through the entirety of the recommendation, and not just drop in for one meeting and disappear, because we'll probably have follow-up. So that's how the core membership question kind of evolves. But yeah, we wouldn't anticipate any votes. Again, it would be similar to, the vote is really around the scope and the budget, and in the end, and I think that anything on the interim would be an approval-based piece, where we would, in the MEP and sustainability focus group, we present life cycle cost analyses and get input from others and all of that, and then we arrive at a recommendation, and then we come to the building committee and say, do you approve of this recommendation? And that's developed. It's not that we come into a meeting and say, you have X system, and X system, please vote on the system. There is one that comes to the forefront because it meets the criteria as spelled out through easy code and the maintenance and everything like that. I do want to take a second, and Ian has had his hand up, and I know it's good to have the OPM weigh in, so where possible, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate that what's being proposed here with these focus groups is just it's a healthy way to dive into the details, and it allows for the architect and design team to have the space they need to do their due diligence in these various topics. And, you know, there's no loss of transparency. There's no loss of public process in what is being proposed, because everything that's done in these focus groups is going to be ratcheted up to, you know, the building committee meetings, and it's going to be presented, and everybody's going to have the opportunity to hear what the various groups have been working on, and then you know, you're going to be able to discuss it and bring in public comment and that sort of thing. So I don't think there's a loss of any of these factors here. It's just a little different way of doing business and giving the architect the ability and the space to do what they need to do to take this project to the next level. So.
And maybe Charlie, to close out your question then, Matt, I so appreciate your expertise on open meeting law from all of your experience. So it may be that when we get this list of volunteers for each of the focus groups, that if one or the other presents a quorum, then we will certainly handle it properly by having it posted and recorded and all of that. But I don't know that we will have a quorum at this time, you know, without hearing the interest for each of the focus groups.
Heather, you got your hand up.
Well, yeah, and I'm actually trying to figure out if my comment is still necessary. It was two parts. One of it is certainly relevant, which is I feel from a transparency and communication standpoint, I feel comfortable that these are an extension of what's going on and diving into the details and then bringing recommendations back to the building committee. So I guess that's the first part, is I'm comfortable with this as is. The part I'm trying to figure out is still relevant. I'm not sure if there's still a lot of discomfort with this. And if there is, then I guess my suggestion or question was to Court's point about acknowledging, and Charlie's about acknowledging the subcommittees and their role. Do we just use the subcommittee structure to do this? And each one is almost like a subcommittee meeting. We're inviting experts, and then it's a focus group. And so if we need to merge the two concepts in order to make this happen, I guess that's my question. Does that make any sense? But I feel like at a high level, this work needs to be done. And this is obviously how a building project happens. And I don't want to cut us off here at the legs when you guys are telling us what needs to be done next, and we're saying that we can't do it. So I just want to make sure there's a way forward here, I guess, is the biggest part of my comment.
My concern with the subcommittees, going back to the quorum piece, is that if, say, the existing subcommittee structure, I would imagine that the design subcommittee would then take on the site focus group work, the exterior and interior focus group work, and the FF&E and technology focus group work,
Right.
and
So
the
it's a lot
safety
of
and
work.
security focus group work. So that's 4 out of 5 would come to the design subcommittee, and we would require all of those meetings, and all of those subcommittee meetings would actually need to be opened and closed with motions. There would need to be a quorum, I believe, for any of them to, to follow the format of a formal subcommittee. So therein lies my concern, is that, that's a lot of meetings, and that entire body would need to be signing up for all 4 of those groups with as many meetings as they require, and have call to order and attendance and so on.
Right. Okay. So not an efficient way to move forward.
Well, and I think there's another issue, and let me just say this, and then Court, I know you had your hand up too. A chief difference that I see is that the focus groups the bus is being driven by the professionals who are in the weeds of what needs to get done to get the project finished. And they have all of the technical expertise, and they're building the building, and they're sort of driving the bus. The subcommittees, more or less, and more so with the design committee, because there were so many big issues and big questions in the design committee, the bus is being driven by the chairs of those subcommittees. So that to me is is a big difference. And I guess I lean towards, at the stage of the project, the bus needs to be driven by the professionals. So having it be a blend, Heather, as you suggest, of a subcommittee and focus groups, seems like it would get that it would take away from the purpose of these being, and I'll say working groups, but I don't mean working groups, but they are really working groups. They are the professionals coming together and sort of wrestling with what HVAC system works best for our environment, versus whether or not we need to have a team approach or a not a team approach. Court, you had your.
Yeah. This is unfortunate, but necessary that we're having this long debate. In pre-COVID, I think we can imagine that Kristen and her team would simply go visit the water department and go visit the transportation department and so on. I don't have any easy suggestions for this. I do think Matt Johnson's question remains on the table. Is there a role for the subcommittees? We might as well get clear on that sooner or later. If the meetings of these focus groups are indeed to be public, a little nuance on open meeting law. It doesn't matter if you're a member of this focus committee or not, if indeed a quorum of this building committee shows up, we're then in violation if it's not posted. So just know there's that little piece to it as well. It's not who's formally on a list, it's who arrives in the room determines whether open meeting law gets tripped or not. Just a fine point there.
Hold on, just to clarify that one, Court, I think it's who shows up and participates, but not who shows up. For instance, the
Right.
entire Concord
Thank you.
School Committee has
Correct.
shown up to this meeting, but we are not in violation because only 2 of us are participating.
Correct. Yeah. If you make it clear you're in the corner mute, you can be in the audience. That's
Right,
correct.
so anyone can be there as an observer.
But
Just
the point
clarifying.
remains. It's pretty delicate. We've got to be careful.
Well, so how many of the committee members can be on a given working group under this scenario?
Well,
I
think it would be a pretty big number. It's like 9 or something, or 8.
Yeah, it's 8 or 9.
It's a big number.
That's
But I just do think that, if the co-chair of the building committee is saying that we can call something a focus group, but it's actually a working group, I think we've kind of crossed the Rubicon and now they're working groups.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can I take that back, Matt? I did, I'm sorry, it's semantics. And if I've crossed the Rubicon, I didn't mean to. What I meant to express was these are, in my world, it's your committee that are they worker bees or are they decision bees? Are they deciding whether or not you're going to have an auction, or are they going to be there creating the auction? So let me retract that statement for the minutes and say let's just keep them as they're focus groups. They are focus groups getting details about what we are going to do to build this building, and the building committee members who are on it need to know that, need to know this information and need to be part of that, but they're not the ones that are designing it.
But they're the ones that are recommending specific attributes and are basically arguing why those approaches or whatever make sense, correct? I mean, this is, I would assume these focus groups would be oriented around trying to figure out what strategy makes best sense for, and what particular technologies make best sense in Concord. And to some extent, that's a matter of values. Whether you want a VRF system or whether that's got a certain kind of intensity in one direction or an alternative to a VRF. There's some nuances here that go beyond just collecting data. This isn't really about data. It's also about values, and it's also about, is there's going to be advocacy in these groups for the things that people believe in. So I just want to make it clear that I think that's what is going to be happening in these groups. It isn't going to be simply a case of, oh, this is technically how this thing works. Okay, thank you very much. We'll go off and thank you for your service. The latter is probably not the way it's going to work.
But decisions are still made at the Public Building Committee, right? It's
Well,
recommendations.
It's quite a
and
nuance.
we
Quite a
can all
nuance.
debate those decisions.
It's quite a nuance, isn't it? I think that for all intents and purposes, you're going to have 90% of the decision made in these working groups or these focus groups, and that's probably the way it should be. You couldn't have the level of discussion other than a ratification going on at a 18-person building committee meeting. You just can't do it. It's not technically it's not feasible. So the nitty gritty stuff about what we're going to do with HVAC or building surfaces or whatever is going to happen in these focus groups, and that's okay. But we should just recognize that is what is going to happen here. I mean, you know, a lot of this stuff is already known. I mean, there's a ton of building science out there. You don't need us to you know, the experts is, you know, it's not a whole lot of unknowns. So, you know, it's how we use what is known and how we put it together and how we pick the pieces that really counts here. So
Maybe Ian and then Matt, and then I might have a recommendation on the subcommittees that I think would be helpful.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, I think something to keep in mind here is that you've hired both an OPM and an architect, and we are advocating for you guys, and we want this project to stay on schedule, and we want this project to stay within budget. So if there are things being brought to the table at these focus group meetings that are out of line, you know, we're going to flag it and say, look, this is a request that came in that's going to cost you more money, and here's why, and we're going to help to parse those things out, and we can, you know, obviously bring those options if we really need to ratchet it up. We'll do that, but we are going to be, you know, keeping those things in mind as we're going through this process. It's always at the forefront: cost and schedule and quality. So that's what I had to say about that particular topic. But the other thing I wanted to mention is, you know, I would stay away from having the subcommittee meetings in addition to the building committee meetings, because it just seems at this point it's duplicative here. So you're reporting up to a committee, and it really should be a full building committee that you're reporting up to, and having you know, recommendations made to, and decisions being made at that level. So I think that it would drastically slow down the process if you had focus groups plus subcommittees plus building committee meetings. It's a lot of repetition there. So.
Chris?
Thanks. Just a couple comments and might have some extensive discussion. I know it's 9:31, so we're kind of going overtime. Comfortable with the structure and have used it very regularly. So that's all well and good.
I think we lost Chris.
Chris, you're breaking up.
One of my concerns for future meetings, and let's see if we, can you hear me now, or is it bad? Oh dear.
We can hear you. You're going in and out.
You're better now. You're better now.
Okay.
I spoke too soon.
No, we lost you again.
Sorry, Chris, I think we lost you again.
I note that Frank had his hand up as well.
Go ahead, Frank. Maybe we can get Chris to reconnect.
This
This old fashioned and
is such a large topic. And there's a lot of,
Chris, we're going to ask you to mute
Okay.
for a moment. Your connection's not slow.
but
We're not understanding you, Chris. Sorry. Frank, do you want to try again? Sorry.
I'm a bit old fashioned and built lots of buildings with big ticket prices on them. But you know, the architects in my book are responsible for this. And I don't know why we're getting into this, to tell you the truth. They're supposed to make the decisions and have a building that can operate. And in the end, if we don't like something, we can tell them to change it. But basically, we should not be in the design of the building. That's not our job.
Thank you, Frank. Point well taken.
Matt?
Yeah, I just was trying to deal with the complexity that we find ourselves in with the
Yes.
Zoom world. So, I mean, I would totally agree that, you know, it makes sense for the architect to be leading the process at this point, to be interviewing the experts, and to be collecting the input to the schematic design. And that, you know, in some respects, we should try to get out of the way of that while providing a clear viewpoint into the process for anyone that's interested to see, okay, how do we get there? And also just for the historic record, it's good to know kind of like, oh, how did we end up with that rubber floor? You know, so but maybe under the circumstances, the safest thing, you know, would be to do this in that subcommittee structure with the understanding that, look, the architects are going to run the process. The agenda item is to, you know, to interview the DPW or whoever it is, and then, you know, collect that info, and that becomes the minutes of the subcommittee meetings that then, you know, report out to the committee, and the committee then, you know, if there's any decision points, that we vote on them in the committee level. And the benefit of this is that you can notice the subcommittee meeting. It's a public meeting. It doesn't have to have public comment, but, you know, it's advertised, and there it goes. I think the one risk with this, though, is you need to have a quorum of the subcommittee members. It's a lot easier than, you know, trying to get a quorum of the committee. But whoever's on the subcommittee has to be pretty dedicated to actually show up at all these things, because, you know, it's a heavy job. And also, it's not like, you know, you're going to have a lot of power in the process, because these are very, very technical points. It's not like we're going to have a lot of input, you know, at the detailed level. So anyway, I just thought, hey, we could take advantage of the structure that we have. I think in the absence of being able to do that, I don't understand why we have subcommittees at this stage.
Thank you, Matt. I see John Harris with his hand up.
Yes, can I just put in my 2 cents? It seems that these are fact-finding meetings, not focus groups, or those two things are the same. So one way to go about it is to have the architect and the OPM do fact-finding meetings, which have something like a deposition or something like a printout sheet that can be brought to the subcommittees. And then any decisions that can be made in the subcommittees. But that would give the architect and the OPM the ability to understand what the intricacies of our particular project is, and then have the subcommittees be able to vote on that.
And can I ask a clarification question on, I guess, to both of you, specifically Matt, when you were saying use the subcommittees, were you saying use the existing subcommittees, like the design subcommittee for 4 of these focus groups, or were you saying take each focus group and make it its own subcommittee?
Yeah, design subcommittee kind of makes sense. Schematic design, you know, seems to make sense to me as a committee.
Except, so the only challenge with that is that Kristen was saying 4 of these focus groups would fall under the design subcommittee, and that's a huge.
Well, that's the
list for
phase we're in.
that.
We're in
So I
schematic
guess where I was
design.
going is, would it make any
You know?
sense to take these focus groups that Kristen suggested and call them subcommittees, and they operate each like their own subcommittee?
No,
instead of
the
existing
focus
ones?
groups are
Again,
they're
just questions.
meetings. They're topics at a subcommittee meeting. I mean, you know, they're a episode in this whole sequence of meetings, each one of them, right? It's not like they are standing committees, each and of themselves, going through a set of topics, as far as I understand it.
Well, that's not my understanding. I think the understanding that we pulled out of Kristen a minute ago was that Kristen would lead these focus groups. We're not
And each have multiple.
wait a second. We're not using the term working group. We're using the term focus group. Kristen would lead each of them, and these would be made up of a set of fairly stable core members who would provide input and have discussion. And then Kristen would go off and sort out, okay, this is what makes sense, what I've heard. And those recommendations from Kristen would go to the building committee as a whole and get ratified at that level. I think that's what I've heard out of all of this. And if I've got that wrong, I'd like to hear someone say what's wrong about it. But that's what I've heard. Is that correct, Kristen? I see nodding.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
So I
That's what I've heard.
I for one also do not think that you can have separate subcommittees doing something and then this other structure that we've got with Kristen. I don't have a problem with the Kristen process, just so long as we don't fool ourselves into thinking that it's just about data. It's not about data. It's about data, and it's about what people think is the right thing to do. But at the end of the day, the architects have to sort this out, and they have to come with a credible plan. And I think Russ has said, hey, we don't like something. We can say we don't like it. We can push back at the building committee level and get it changed. But I think at the end of the day, the architects have to sort this stuff out and have to come out with a plan based upon our input and the input of experts and so forth. But that's the structure as I see it. And I don't think we can have both subcommittees and focus groups.
So can I build on that point? Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
So I think, because I actually have to leave, I was gonna say I have to leave another meeting, I'm sorry. Charlie, if I heard you, I understand the same way you understand it. And hearing your comfort level with that process, I have a comfort level with that process, but I also hear clearly what we're saying in terms of expectations for, community input. And so I guess what I would say before I go here is, can we try the process that's been laid out by SMMA that I think Hill, our agent here, supports? And if we determine in the early going that it isn't meeting the expectations for engagement, then we can change it. But I just feel like we're not going to get to step one, or just put one. We're not going to put one foot in front of the other if we're stuck on, building the perfect mousetrap now. I think we need to just move forward, and I think the expectations have been made clear. If it turns out that like I said, if it turns out it's just not working, then let's change it up. But can we at least try to follow that process to get us going? So,
well, the process has been laid out. I mean, I think I said I was comfortable. I'm okay with it. It's fine. We just got to pick one and got to go with it and make the best of it. And to your point, if we have to change it, we'll change it. So.
I can support that, and I can support another possibility if we wanted to make more clear and more formal the public nature of this. And that would be something along these lines, that, for example, subcommittees hear from the design team twice a month, where the information that they have gathered, that they are refining to bring to the entire committee, comes before a subcommittee first, as a way to kick it around publicly before it goes live at the full committee meeting. I think, Kristen, you have done that before with subcommittees, and I think it has been to your advantage. that might be a mechanism whereby focus groups have all the flexibility and speed that they need, all the the latitude that they need, but you still have that brief intermediate step that is highly public before it goes to the full committee. Might be a way to go and try it for a month and see how that works. But I'm prepared to support skipping that too, but it does then obligate us to ask the question, what ultimately will we do with these subcommittees?
So one thought I had just looking back at the charge of the subcommittees originally is that it was the design subcommittee is to review the design and ensure it's sound and responsible and consistent, and sustainability was similar on the sustainability vein. What if we proceed with the layout of the focus groups as presented, and then before the estimating set have a summary and with the updates to the building committee at large for any policy level questions or concerns. Again, as Stephen mentioned, we can call a subcommittee meeting if we need to because something very specific has come up. But I think that the goal would be to maybe have the subcommittees or the focus groups proceed over the course of the schematic design. And in the end, I can see the sustainability subcommittee came out with a charge to us to say, this is what we are asking for the building, for the building to perform. And so I think that maybe at the conclusion, it would be for us to present to the sustainability subcommittee what the focus groups have developed, and the sustainability subcommittee would then let us know if that's consistent with the charge from feasibility study. Because I think, we got, again, at the end of feasibility, the design subcommittee said, this is what we would like to see of schematic design. So let us perform schematic design and then let us come back to you and see if we've met your criteria and goals as established at the conclusion.
That's another version of that intermediate step that might be of value to you, because to Frank's point, this isn't the focus group responsibility. Ultimately, it's yours. I think that works.
So do we need a motion for this? Do we need to describe this in any way? Or do
Yeah, just because the conversation's been so complex, I think we want to be sure we're all clear on exactly what we're going to do.
Yeah.
So I would suggest the motion and a vote, and I'm sure others are getting up against time here too. So I'll
Yes.
just note that.
Would it, to summarize it, I feel like Kristen, you're the best able. Could you summarize it in a way that one of us could say so moved?
So, okay, let me give it a try.
Sorry
Thanks,
to put
Heather.
you on the spot, or somebody else can. I just feel like you have the
Yeah.
best feel for the whole thing.
Matt's always done a great job at this, but we'll go for it. So the focus groups will be comprised of volunteers from the building committee and experts as required by each of their subject matters. And they will be posted publicly and recorded, and the minutes will be made public from those meetings as appropriate for safety and security. And those will occur over the course of schematic design. Building committee meetings will take place monthly with updates from all of the focus group meetings. And at the conclusion of schematic design, before the estimating set is put out for estimating, the subcommittees will meet and review the process and ensure and decide if it is consistent with the direction given at the end of feasibility and the goals.
So moved.
I'll second for discussion.
Yeah, I'll just for discussion, Kristen, review the process, or is it review the process and the recommendations?
Process and recommendations. I didn't want to say decisions because they're not.
Okay.
Recommendations. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, moved as edited with process and recommendations.
Thank you for putting that together, Kristen.
Lori? Oh, thank you, Matt. Okay.
Well,
so
I'll
we have a-
second Heather just for process. And then I think we'd be asking Hill and SMMA to put all the timeline together so we all see what this really looks like and get that out to us because that will make it concrete.
Correct. And in the meantime, please send, Kristen, do you want to hear directly from members which focus groups they are interested in participating in? Or do you want that to come through Pat and I? I just worry with with us as middlemen, something could get lost. So I guess I'm asking.
Yeah, for the sake of efficiency, if everyone wants to write to Pat and Dawn and CC me, then I would have it firsthand as well.
Okay, that would be great. All right.
And do we have a list of those focus groups? That slide that defines it, can that just be?
It was, Pat, you
Okay.
have it. The draft of the slides that was sent around by Aaron has that in it.
Okay, all right, and everybody has that draft.
Yep.
Okay, great.
They should. And I think it's also on our website.
Okay.
Okay, great. So let's call for a vote if there's no more discussion.
I just have a quick question.
Oh, sure.
For
I didn't
Kristen.
see it.
Kristen, I just want to make sure that you're comfortable with this process, keeping us on schedule and not jeopardizing it.
I think we've arrived at a good medium.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Okay. Justin, was that your hand or are you swatting a fly? It looks like no. Okay.
In full disclosure, I swatted an email that just popped. I want anything to do with that email.
I just didn't want to miss if you had something to contribute. Okay, great. I will call for a vote then. I think Stephen had to leave us. I don't see him anymore. Correct
He
me if I'm
did
wrong.
leave, yes.
He said he had to go.
Yep. Jared Stanton.
Yes.
Thank you, Jared. Matt Johnson.
Yes.
Lori.
Yes.
Justin.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Russ.
Yes.
Kate.
Yes.
Peter Fashelis.
Yes.
Court.
Yes.
Heather.
Yes.
Frank.
No.
Chris.
Yes.
Charlie.
Yes.
Matt Root.
Yes.
Pat.
Yes.
And I'll be a yes. Okay, great. So we have a process. We're going to outline it for our next meeting. That's another thing I want to talk about quickly, and we need to get to public comments as well before time runs out on us, because I know folks may have 10 o'clocks. And everyone's going to reach out to Pat and I, CC and Kristen with focus group desires as far as participation. Okay, thank you. When is our next meeting, Kristen? I think it was once a month, but do we need to do something sooner in order to sort of solidify this process and get the meeting, who's in what groups, and then a meeting approximate maybe week of schedule in place so that folks at least know, and then we'll do the doodle polls, however you had a suggestion on, Thursday mornings, if that worked for folks.
Maybe to also address Matt's earlier comments in the meeting, we
About
could
this.
meet on the 3rd, and that way I can present the public forum presentation
Perfect.
draft with
Mhm.
the range of square footage and everything, and then this schedule and organization.
I support that because I think we need to see all of that as well as make sure this gets defined. Okay, so let's plan on the 3rd of June. Oh my gosh. Okay, 3rd of June. Next meeting, 7:30. Already, huh? Okay. I just want to make sure I'm not going out of order. So perfect. So that's next steps. Any new business? Hearing none. Public comment?
Dean's hand is up.
Dean. Yep, I just saw your virtual hand, Dean.
Thank you. I'm going to
take my comment all the way back to the very beginning of the meeting before you got into the whole focus group conversation.
Sorry,
and it
Dean,
was
would you just
something-
say who you are? I'm sorry for.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Dean Banfield. I'm the Finance Committee Observer. I am 73 Walden Terrace.
Thank you.
So I want to take the conversation all the way back to the very beginning. It was something that Matt had said, which is that you didn't have an actual space summary. So we were sort of leaping ahead on a process basis to get into schematic design. I had sent an email because I am very concerned that the administrators are sacrificing 2 precious spaces and that other work could be done to manipulate the space summary so that those could be saved. And so I'm just going to suggest that between now and when you have your next meeting on June 3rd, that the administrators go back, sit down with Kristen and see what they could do in an alternative to save those 2 spaces. They've agreed to give up 2,600 square feet, but those 2,600 square feet can come from other places. So that's just my suggestion. I took a pass at it. It's obviously just one person thinking about the ideas, but I'm just suggesting that there could be alternatives to giving up those 2 spaces, which I think are key to the education plan. So that's just my comment.
Appreciate that comment, Dean. Thank you. Dory.
Yes, thank you. I'll just make a very quick comment. And that is that I am concerned about that at the very beginning of the meeting, sorry, this is not staying on, that I hope that there's clarity on the part of the committee, that there was clarity on the part of the school, of the public, of the finance committee and the select board, that 100 million is what we're really hoping at, not 100, maybe around 100 million. So I don't want there to be kind of an idea that's just a hope and maybe not really going to happen. And that really needs to be forefront in your minds, because you need a vote on this, and you don't want to have done all of your work to have a turn down vote at town meeting or at the polls. That's not a threat. It's just that it would be a shame after all the time and effort. This morning is a good example of that you've put into it, to have it be for naught. The second is, at a public forum, I know you need to be prepared that there are going to be specific questions. And the gym, it seems to me, has been a main one. So if I might make a suggestion, it would be that at the public forum in June, you have it nailed down pretty much what you want and what this gym is going to look like. Otherwise, you're going to be dragged through I don't mean the word drag, but it's going to go on and on again. So please be clear when you are at the meeting in June, this is what we are going to be recommending. And Kristen, I have to commend you for your patience. I mean, it's been a long, difficult meeting, but Concord is a community that we all want to have an input. And I know you're trying to make your way through that. So my thanks to you for your patience for this all. But thank you very much, all of you, for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dory. Anyone else? Looks like not. Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I assume no discussion. Speak now. Okay. Jared? Jared
Yes.
still with us? Jared? Yes, motion to adjourn, Jared.
Yes.
Matt Johnson. I see head
Yes,
nodding
I'm on
from
mute,
Matt.
but yeah, there.
There you go. Thank you. Lori?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Russ?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Court?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
Matt Root?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. We'll see everyone on the 3rd. Thank you. Thank you all
Bye,
so much.
everyone.